Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Bella and I'm a seamstress and I want to teach you how to sew. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this really adorable tiered sundress. I thrifted this really pretty gingham fabric, so I used that for this project and it only cost me about $8 to make. Head to the thrift store, get an old bed sheet or something like that, anything you think is cute, and let's get started. But before we do, are you subscribed yet? Because if you want to see more sewing tutorials like this one and more kind of slow living lifestyle content, then make sure that you're subscribed down below so you don't miss any of my videos. I'm starting by cutting my bust pieces. I just roughly measured the width of 1/2 of my bust and also the bottom of my bust to the top of my bust. And then I took that square measurement and just sort of tapered it off on both sides to create a sort of V-neck cup shape. So we have our two outer pieces for the bodice, and now I need to cut my lining pieces. So I'm just going over that same pattern piece and cutting 2 more in the same fabric. I'm cutting the back panel. You can be pretty generous with this if you want to add elastic in at the end. So I would go with about twice your back width measurement. And then I also trimmed this down a little bit because I realized it was too tall, so just sort of line it up with the cups to be about where you want it to fall. Now I'm cutting straps. I just cut 4 strips so that I can create tie straps. These are going to be set into the bodice once we sew them into tubes and turn them inside out. Now we're cutting 1 panel for the skirt. This is going to be about 2 times your waist or hip measurement. It doesn't have to be super precise, but just roughly somewhere around there. And the second tier should be about 1.5 to 2 times the width of your first tier. Now I'm cutting pockets. These were very much eyeballed, so if you want to add pockets in, you can cut those now. So I'm going to start with the bodice. I think I'm going to work on that start to finish, so I have that done, and then I'll add the skirt on after. So basically what I have here is my bust pieces. So I have 4 of these total cut, so 2 for the outer layer and 2 for the lining. I'm using the exact same fabric for the lining as well as the outer shell, just so that when I turn everything inside out, you're not seeing like a contrasting sort of fabric. But if you don't have enough to line it with the same fabric, then use whatever you think would complement your fabric. So then next I have my back panel. What I'm going to do with this is basically sandwich it in between these bust pieces, because I realized I actually want the outer side of the bust to be straight across here, not tapered like this. So that's totally fine because I gave myself a generous amount to work with for the back. So it's sort of going to sit like this and just kind of ease into the back. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my back panel and I'm just going to fold the top over twice and then stitch that down so that we start with a nice clean finish and we don't have to do that later. I'm sort of sandwiching the back panel in between our 2 bust pieces, so that's your outer layer and your lining. and then you're gonna stitch that down along the side. I'm also trimming this here because I realized I didn't need it to be curved. So just pin that in place and sew down that one whole side of your bust piece. You can see when you turn it inside out that it just sits really nice and clean, and there's no edges or anything like that that you need to finish. Now I'm working on straps. Basically, you just want to take those strips that we cut, fold them in half, sew it down into a tube, and then I'm taking a safety pin, attaching it onto the end of the tube, and then we're going to turn it inside out. When you're done doing this, you also have the option of top stitching it down, but I like to just iron my straps. Similar to how we sandwiched in the back panel, you're going to do the same thing with the straps, but just pinning it up at the top like this, and then continue the same process of pinning the other side down and then stitch in place on that line. So I kind of got the base of my bodice done. I just added some top stitching all along here, and then I attached the straps onto the back as well as the front pieces that we just sewed. So I'm going to set this aside for just a minute and pick up our first panel of the skirt, which is going to be roughly 1.5 to 2 times your hip measurement. So I kind of just eyeballed it. You really don't have to be super precise with these measurements. As long as you're somewhere within that ballpark, you should have a really nice amount of fabric to work with. So what I'm going to do with this strip of fabric is cut it in half so that it is 2 pieces, because in order to add the pockets on, we need 2 side seams. One of the reasons that I love working with gingham is that it's such an exact geometric pattern that you don't really have to measure as much, because you can just follow along with the lines that are already on the fabric, which is really nice. So what you're going to do is kind of line this up where your bust is going to end and mark off where you want your pocket to go. So for me, that's going to be about 10 inches. I'm going to place a pin on each side at that exact mark. So there's my pins. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So taking a look at one of these panels, let's just start with that. You're going to find where you placed your pin, and then take one of your pocket pieces and just line up that straight edge with the pin there so that your pocket is sitting like this along the side seam. For these pocket pieces also, you can kind of just trace whatever pocket shape you like from a garment that you already have, or if you are comfortable just eyeballing it, that's what I did. It really doesn't have to be super exact, honestly. It's just up to personal preference what sort of size and shape you want your pocket to be. So I'm pinning this all down along the side seam there, and then you're going to repeat this process on all 4 sides that you placed pins in. So this next part might be a little bit tricky. What you're going to do is take this panel that you just sewed your pockets to. We're going to flip the pockets out like this, and then take the opposite panel that you just did and place them right sides together. And same thing, pull that pocket out as well. So it should be sitting like this against each other with both pockets facing out like this. So what you're going to do is pin and sew, or just sew if you're feeling risky. Pin and sew all down here, and then when you get to this pocket, adding in your same seam allowance that you're using here, you're going to go out and sew all along the pocket, and then continue down that straight seam. now is time for one of those magical sewing moments. You have your pocket sewn in like this, and when you turn this panel inside out, you are left with a beautiful, seamless pocket right here. So especially once this fabric is nice and gathered in the skirt, you really won't see these at all. So after you do this, I would recommend ironing it at some point between now and when you're done the dress, just so that it all sits really nice and flat. But I think we're ready to attach this onto the bodice. Okay, I had to do a few things off camera because I needed to charge my battery and just fuss around with this dress a little bit and fix a few things. So one thing that I did do off camera is I added in an extra panel into the back here, and then I put elastic thread going through this entire thing. I would just err on the side of a lot of fabric for the back panel, enough so that if you want to put in elastic thread, you have quite a bit to work with. Otherwise, you can just be a little bit generous by adding a few inches and then put a zipper in the back if you prefer to do that. But I really just wanted to be able to throw this dress on and not have to worry about doing a zipper up and down. And then I sewed on the first layer here and just slightly gathered it as I went. So I'm going to show you how to do that with our next panel. You're going to use the exact same technique for this main panel as you do for the bottom tier that we're going to add, so I just thought I would only show you one of those. So basically what I've done is just marked in the exact middle point between the side seams on the front and back. And then you're going to take your next panel, which was the very long strip that we cut, and sew that into a tube like so. It should be kind of ridiculously long. So I'm gonna find my side seam that I created on this, so it's right here, and I'm gonna line that up to be at the center point of the back. Your dress is gonna be upside down like this. Find the center point. For me, it's right here. And then right sides together, you're gonna place the seam from that strip that's going to attach the tier, and you're gonna place that right at that center point and pin it. And then what I like to do to just even everything out is do the exact same thing on the front. So find the center point of the front of the dress, and then also find the center point of the front of the tier, making sure that you don't twist this all up. So make sure that everything is aligned and going the right way, because you don't want to start pinning this and then realize that you twisted your fabric and have to go back and do it all over again. So there's the center point. You don't actually really have to be super exact with this bottom layer, because there's so much fabric that if you're a few inches off with your center point, it's really not gonna show at all. So what I've done with this is I've continued to space my pins out evenly throughout this whole thing, and so then that means that you know you have an equal amount of excess fabric in between each set of pins, so you're not going to spend all that time gathering it just for it to be the wrong amount of fabric. So you know that this is perfectly evenly spaced, and then you just have a really nice manageable amount of fabric to work with to make your gathers. So really all you're going to do is take this section and really just start kind of puckering the fabric like this and pinning it down in place in those gathers. That's how I personally do it. There's so many other methods that you can use to create gathers. If you want to do your own research and figure out a way that is best for you, then do that, but this is just how I like to do it. And then I just stitch all the way down on top of them, especially when you're working with a lot of fabric like this and it's just a light, like cottony sort of material. I don't really feel the need to be super precise with them. It's not like pleating where I want it to be all perfectly even. I kind of just smush the fabric together and pin it and then stitch down on top of it. So I'm going to do that now, and then we just need to hem the dress and we're done. And that is it for this video. I am so happy with how this turned out. It's exactly how I pictured it in my brain, and I think it was relatively easy to sort of make a pattern for this on your own. So I hope that you all enjoyed this, and hopefully you try it out. If you do, then please send it to me or tag me. My Instagram and TikTok are both at Bella Villianti, and they'll be linked down below. If you want to see more content like this, then please consider subscribing. And if you want to further support my channel, you can buy me a coffee. The link will be in the description down below. See you next time.